Late Night America is a presentation of WPBS in Detroit, brought to you by public television stations, by the Stroh Brewery Company, family brewers for over 200 years, and by the makers of Soloflex.
Good evening, friends. Welcome to Late Night America. We hope you had a nice weekend. Later tonight, a conversation with a nutritionist whose clients include some top athletes. His theory is you eat to win. Right now, we're going to talk with Mike Farrell. You know him from MASH, of course. He's involved in all kinds of television activity, including a series on child sexual abuse prevention and a special coming up this Wednesday on PBS, JFK, a one-man show. Off camera, he's deeply committed to and knowledgeable about what is happening in Central America. His last trip to El Salvador and Nicaragua. We're very pleased to have Mike with us this evening. Welcome.
Thank you, Dennis. It's nice to be here.
Why is it and how did it come to pass that you got more involved and knowledgeable about Central America than the average person?
Well, I suppose it starts with what you do for a living. People who work with refugees around the world came to me because of my association with refugees on the show, on Korean refugees, and introduced themselves and told me about their program and got me involved in eventually becoming the American spokesperson for Concern, which is a international refugee organization. In that capacity, I traveled around considerably, actually went around the world to different refugee spots, and in '82 went to Honduras, where the Salvadoran refugees are maintained in camps under the aegis of the UN. Concerned volunteers are there dealing with them. Some refugees from Guatemala are there as well. And it was a sort of a rude awakening to talk to these people and talk to the humanitarian volunteers who are there and find out that the facts as they describe them, as the people on the ground describe them, are very different from what the government was telling us.
When you pick up a newspaper here and you read stories about what's happening in Central America, you have a new perspective on the whole thing now.
Oh, sure.
What do you see is going on down there? And maybe you can explain it to us in kind of general terms, your own terms.
Well, my own perspective, it's not just from that one trip. I've since been down there twice as part of human rights delegations into Salvador itself, and as you just indicated, to Salvador and Nicaragua on the last trip. Essentially what's happening is that we being the United States, is pursuing a policy based on an ugly misconception about the roots of the problem, and that we are supporting a government in El Salvador that's waging war on its own people, brutally. I mean, destroying lives and property of thousands and thousands of people with our weapons, our personnel, our training, our tax dollars. And it's the kind of thing that is really brutalizing, I think, to us as a people, as well as obviously to the people of Central America. But interestingly enough, there are some inspirational aspects to it as well.
How so? What do you say?
Well, I am constantly amazed when I go down there to talk to the people on the ground doing the work. Sometimes the humanitarian volunteers, most often the Salvadorans or whoever the people are in question themselves, quite often religious people. I talked to an American priest the first time I was there, and he said, they think we're all communists, you know. He said anybody who deals with the poor as though they deserve to be treated with dignity are considered communists. He talked about the harassment at the hands of the military, the sweeps of the Salvadoran army across the Honduran border, through the camps to take out people that they considered to be subversives.
Now you're saying that the way you see it is that the government itself is waging war on its own people.
The Salvadoran government, yes.
That was the statement that you used.
Right.
When you go down there, you're an actor, well-known actor here in the United States, but also tied in doing the relief work, working with the refugees. Who do you go with? How do you get access to talk with people? Where do you stay? Who do you talk to? Things like that. Yeah?
First time I went was strictly with the refugee aid organizations people and some other people who came because they were interested. And we went into the camps and slept in the camps and stayed there.
And they don't know anything of your celebrity, do they, down there?
No. So, of course, the volunteers do, the Western volunteers do. But the peasants themselves have no access to television, so they certainly don't know about that. Occasionally you'll find someone who does in the country in question, wherever it is. That was the first trip. The second trip, I went with a delegation, human rights delegation, and there were members of Congress and former members of the Carter administration and business people and educators and authors and all kinds of people, a real broad cross-section of society. And we went into Salvador and stayed at a hotel in San Salvador, and where the American press stays most of the time. And we had access, because of the trip having been set up by the Commission on U.S. Central American Relations, we had access really across the board to the U.S. Embassy, to the Salvadoran political structure, to the military. We were one of the first delegations to go into the prisons to talk to the political prisoners. We talked to the human rights organizations, to the people in the church.
Who are the political prisoners?
Well, political prisoners are just what the term denotes. They're people who have expressed disagreement with, or maybe not even expressed disagreement with, talked about wanting to have a free electoral process, for example, said anything that could have been construed as being in disagreement with the current government's policies, or nothing. People who simply were union members, people who talked to a man who showed us the scars of the torture, and his crime was that he was the president of a teachers union. People who were related to somebody that the government thought was a subversive. The nature of political crime in a climate like that is
Are they all men, or are there women in there, or
there are two
children?
prisons. Mariona prison is men's prison. Ilopango prison is a women's prison in which there are some children.
Let me ask the folks at home to jump into our conversation. We're talking with Mike Farrell tonight about his very, very deep concern for what is happening in Central America. And we've taken the conversation off into a little different area than you might have expected with Mike being here. 313 in Detroit, 872-4040. I guess it's fair to say that any question concerning Mike, his show business career, and all would be fair game, but he's very, very interested in talking about some serious things here tonight. And obviously, a lot of actors use their celebrity to stay on the beach. Mike has gone a lot further than that. You've testified in Washington. You've made a statement for the Democratic Party Platform Committee.
Right.
When somebody like yourself is called on to testify or to make a statement, what is the thrust of what you tell them, and how do you frame it?
Well, someone like myself or anybody else, you tell them what is the truth as you perceive it. I simply got up and told the people in the House Foreign Affairs Committee what I saw, what my experience was, what my perception was of what was the problem, that we are very distinctly, and I think clearly, headed toward another Vietnam-like situation in which, if the administration stays on the policy, on the course that it has charted, we'll have American troops committed there before too awfully long, and I don't want to see that happen.
Yeah, you started off your statement when you testified, what was it, a couple of years ago, a year or so
73.
ago. 83.
83,
right,
so what's...
Right, that you said, I come to you as an angry man, because you said, I don't want to see us slip into another Vietnam.
Absolutely. Well, I don't. I mean, and the polls show that the American people don't want that either, but most of the people don't understand what's going on, so there's a great deal of confusion. You know, when President Reagan gets on the television and says to the people, we're fighting international communism, then the people tend to want to believe that, because you don't like to think the president will lie to you.
Well, let's address that, because Ronald Reagan clearly believes that he has to draw a line. The United States has to draw a line, and the place to draw it is in a place like El Salvador to prevent communism from taking root in Central America. And whether it's there or our involvement in Nicaragua, with the troop maneuvers in Honduras, places like that, he thinks that all is very, very important.
Oh yes, very clearly, and I think that's an important thing for us all to understand. My conviction is that he believes what he's saying. That doesn't mean that. I'm not saying he's an insincere man. I think he's very wrong. And I think that we deserve better than that in terms of leadership, and certainly better than that in terms of information.
Okay, now you get folks who are watching the television set right now across America, and they're saying, who is an actor to say that I know better than the President of the United States?
I understand it. Well, of course, he was an actor himself at one point.
not a bad way to retort.
I once made the claim that he shows evidence of being every bit as good a president as he was an actor.
But how do you allay people's concerns and fears of saying the President of the United States knows?
Well, I think that that's a very dangerous position for people in a democracy to take. First of all, we are supposed to be the power source. The people of a democracy are supposed to be the source from which power is derived. So the President of the United States, as we have seen historically, is quite often wrong and pursues policies which are not consonant with our beliefs. The only way that is going to be foreshortened or curtailed is if we say, wait a minute, as we did in Vietnam, that doesn't square with what I understand America to be about. Let's take another look. You know, we have to take a look at the situation, find out what the facts are, instead of just saying, well, he's the president, he must know.
There's kind of an odd thing that a lot of people can't put together for themselves, and that's the proximity of Nicaragua and El Salvador.
Right.
And in one situation here, we're backing the government in power.
Right.
And here, we're backing on the other side over in Nicaragua, we're backing a band of people who, well, what do they call it? The CIA's overt, covert war. I mean, we're supplying advice, we're supplying weapons, we're supplying training for people to overthrow a government. Now, you spent some time in Nicaragua.
Right.
How do the people see it? How do the people there see the government?
First of all, let me make clear that President Reagan, who we are saying that a lot of people out there will say knows what he's talking about, denied that that was happening originally. He said that it was not happening. There was no CIA involvement in the Contra activity in Nicaragua. Then when the facts were laid out for the American public to see very clearly, he said, well, yes, in fact, it is happening.
On page 1 of the New York Times.
Yes, it is happening, and we're going to keep doing it because it's a good thing to do. Then when he went ahead with the mining of the harbors, or he told them to go into the mining of the harbors, and even Barry Goldwater said that that's foolishness and an act of war, he continues to say, well, it's important. I think that at some point we have to stop and say, what is at stake? What is at risk? And what is it that's so important that we could betray our basic principles, it seems to me. What I saw in Nicaragua is a country more solidly behind its government. I have personally some quarrel with Sandinistas. I don't think they are God's gift to government. However, they are an indigenous Nicaraguan answer to a very serious and ongoing problem, which was the Somoza dictatorial regime for some 50 years. What the people now are doing as a result of this pressure on them by the American-supported, CIA-supported counter-revolutionaries is rallying behind the Sandinistas more firmly than they ever would have thought of doing before. We are kind of driving them effectively into the arms of the people we claim to despise. So it seems to me we make the Sandinistas and the anti-Americanism a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy.
Once you move away from the cities, and I gather in both of the countries you've had a chance to move out a little bit,
right.
Is there any common denominator on how the street people or the peasants or whatever you want to call them, how they see the United States?
You know, there's an extraordinary grace and an extraordinary generosity about the people of Central America that I've found. First of all, they invariably thank us, those of us who come down. They say, thank you for caring enough to come to my country and see for yourself. Then they say, we understand that it's not the American people who are pursuing these policies. Now that bespeaks a sophistication that really amazes me. We understand it's not the American people that are responsible for these policies, but in fact, Ronald Reagan, the Reagan administration, the politicians. But they are getting, I mean, in particular in Nicaragua, they're getting more and more angry all the time. And they talk about having been invaded over and over and over again. You know, historically, the Americans have invaded Nicaragua for 50, 80, 100 years. So there is a tremendous sophistication, a tremendous grace, a tremendous generosity, and it's getting harder and harder for them to continue to be willing to accept the fact that there will be change.
Let me get the folks at home involved in our conversation. Our guest is Mike Farrell. You know him from his television and film work. A little later on in the program, we're going to tell you about some of the projects that Mike is very, very much involved in. Seems to have found a home in PBS, which I think is absolutely terrific.
Thank you.
Anyway, your phone call is coming up next on Late Night America. Hi there, you're on Late Night America.
Yes, this is Lee from Milwaukee, Dennis.
Go ahead, Lee.
Yeah, I'd like to ask Mr. Farrell a question. He was allowed to interview political prisoners in El Salvador.
Yes.
And what I'd like to ask is, was he allowed to interview political prisoners in Nicaragua or Cuba, for instance?
Well, I haven't been to Cuba. Yes, we were allowed to see political prisoners in Nicaragua, and anybody who wants to go there can and do so. Ramsey Clark and David Rothenberg from the Fortune Society recently came back from Nicaragua and talked about their visits to the prisons there. As a matter of fact, there is an American nun who runs the human rights organization in Nicaragua, and she is very forthright in her support of the Sandinistas' care of prisoners in Nicaragua. And the recent report on the part of Amnesty International says that the Nicaraguan, excuse me, the treatment of political prisoners in Nicaragua is exemplary as opposed to that in El Salvador.
Hi there, you're on Late Night America.
Hi, I'm Dennis. I'm calling from Manhattan.
Hi there.
Hi, I'd like to ask Mike if he thinks. That if Reagan is reelected, if it will almost certainly result in military escalation, not only in Salvador, but with the war games in Honduras and the invasion practices that he's adopted, might result in another invasion of Nicaragua. What does he think of that?
I think that that's a very real possibility. Senator Joe Biden told me a matter of 2 months ago that he feels if Reagan is reelected in November, we'll have American troops on the ground in Central America in January. Senator Alan Cranston said the same thing. So it's not just some fluky notion, that I've come up with. The people of Nicaragua very much fear that. And if you look at the fact of the escalation over the period of time since Reagan has come into office, I think there's a very real possibility that we need to concern ourselves with.
Hi there, you're on Late Night America.
Ron calling from Sudbury. I'd like to ask him about the comparison between his activities in Central America and to what I heard 10 years ago in Vietnam and Cambodia, when well-meaning Americans also went there and came back and saying, look, there's no religious freedom, and disaster which fell upon the people in Cambodia, and whether he'll take the same responsibility that Susan Sontag said American liberals have to share because of the tragedy that happened in South Vietnam and Cambodia.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm not sure I get the connection. I think that they're very different places, although I think our policy is beginning to look like it is the same, and that we regard them as very, very much the same kind of place. And I think that's what the essential mistake is. I think the real question about Vietnam really should be what would have happened in 1956 if Eisenhower had allowed them to have a free election.
What would have happened if you had found yourself over there? And people should know of your own military background, huh? I mean, you served,
yes,
right? Yeah. So you're not just somebody coming in here off the wall. I mean, having no thought one way or the other. Can you put yourself back in a situation as to what you might have said about Vietnam a long time ago?
Well, I did. I said, the same things about Vietnam a long time ago that a lot of people were saying, and that was, I was in the streets. I was out of the service at that time. I'd been in the Marine Corps and out, but I was in the streets saying, this doesn't make sense for us to be trying to determine for other people what their government should be in the face of the kind of flimsy evidence we've been given to bolster a theory about communist domination.
We did a program recently, and I'm not going to be able to come up with the name of the organization, but they were veterans who had been to Nicaragua and kind of looked around at the situation. And a couple of them had served in Vietnam. One had not. One had actually spent the war in Canada. I think
yes.
I think that's it. But I was reading some mail over the weekend, and some of the folks were really angry that these veterans, and this one in particular, came on the program and were given a forum to say that they wanted to alert the public that they could be looking at another Vietnam. Very, very angry.
Yeah.
So that's why I brought out your own military background.
It's interesting to me. I remember getting a letter from a woman one time who said to me about my statement of opposition to our policy in Vietnam. She said, if you're right, if what we're doing in Vietnam is wrong, then my son died for nothing. I think that's the kind of emotional investment that people have in those kinds of things. And I think those are the sorts of things we want to see don't happen again.
Hi there, you're on Late Night America?
Yeah. Ron from Erie, Pennsylvania.
Go ahead, Ron.
Mike, I want to know, do you feel our government is filling us with propaganda because the films we see on the news lead us to believe that the majority of people in El Salvador back their government?
Well, understand that when an administration in power has a particular policy, then what they do is put out information that supports that policy. That's their job. I think it behooves us to simply look past that. There are also films on television which show interviews with Guillermo Ungo, a social democrat from El Salvador who was disallowed when he was elected in 1972, who left the junta in 1979, and is now the head of the FDR, the front, which is in opposition to the government in El Salvador. So you can get counter-information if you like, but certainly the administration is putting out information that supports its claims.
Hi there, you're on Late in America.
Hi, I'm Jim from National Park, New Jersey. Mike, I'd like to ask you a question on, I know I'm quite aware of what's going on in El Salvador with the right-wing death squads, but I also see the Sandinistas and what they're doing to the Mesquite Indians, and how do we reach a balance there?
Yeah, I think I'd like to know more about what you see. Because of my concern with refugees, when I went into Nicaragua in 1982, I specifically went to the mosquito refugee camps and saw that, in fact, what then Secretary of State Haig was saying about a genocidal campaign against the mosquitoes was, in fact, not true. The Sandinistas are the first to admit that they made terrible mistakes with regard to the mosquitoes, and the Sandinistas have made some other mistakes that I alluded to earlier, and I don't think they should be let off the hook for them. But there is an amnesty now with regard to any charges against the mosquitoes. There is a mosquito, there are mosquito resettlement camps, and there is a program which is trying to assimilate the mosquitoes and support mosquito programs and trying to right the wrongs they did down there. And I don't think a government can do a whole lot more than admit they were wrong and try and fix it.
Hi there, you're on Late Night America.
Yes, this is Irene from Michigan. Mr. Farrell, I greatly admire you and Mr. Asner and others like you for the fine work that you're doing.
Thank you.
And I want to know if you find it as ironic as I do that Mr. Dubuisson is presently in this country. He is the torturer of his people. He's tortured them with blowtorches. He has had an invitation to come to this country, whereas a German peace delegation was denied entry. They were supposed to tour the cities, and the City Council of Detroit had invited them, and today was the meeting, and they were not present because Schultz denied them an entry visa. I find that a very dangerous kind of situation that the American people really aren't aware of the double standard.
Well, I don't know anything about the particular instance you're talking about. It is curious that Roberto Dubuisson, who was called by the former ambassador to El Salvador a pathological murderer, would be welcomed by the United States government. And when Tomas Borge, the head of the junta in Nicaragua, is not allowed entrance to the country, I think that kind of double standard does exist, and I think it's the kind of thing we as American citizens ought to complain about.
Hi there, you're on Late Night America.
Yeah, it's Larry from Toronto.
Hi, Larry.
I'd like to ask Mike how we might, out of all the confusion of looking from the right side, the left side,
yes,
from Reagan, from wherever, through the media, how we might combat the apathy of what's going on, and be able to glean some moment of truth out of the whole thing and really know where we're coming from.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you're calling from Toronto, so I think I can't speak to you as an American citizen, probably, but I think that it's important for those of us in this country to understand that there is a right and there is a wrong. Harry Truman said a long time ago that you can't look at the polls, you've really got to finally understand that there is a moral question involved, and there is a right and a wrong, and then you've got to proceed on that basis. We in this country really provide, as I mentioned earlier to Dennis, the source of power, and if we decide that the administration is wrong, we can exercise that power and exorcise the policy. And I think we ought to be doing that. Then there are a lot of ways to go about it. You can support refugee aid organizations, you can support political organizations, you can write your letters to the congressmen and women and representatives and senators of your choice. You can voice your opinion on the radio and television shows and in the press. You can inform yourself. A very interesting thing happened to me when I came back from Salvador about thinking about ways you can contribute. A cab driver picked me up at the airport, and he was driving me home asking me where I'd been, and I started to talk to him about it, and he said, he began to ask me questions, and he began to kind of recall his experiences when he was protesting the Vietnam War. And it was about a half-hour ride, and we got toward the end of the ride, and he was saying, talking about what I'd seen down there, and he said, who paid for your trip? And I said, I did. And he reached over and turned off the meter in his cab, and he said, well, consider this my contribution.
Ooh.
There are a lot of ways you can help.
Huh. There's an organization that we want to put an address up on the screen, and you might tell us a little bit about the Committee on U.S. Central American Relations.
Right.
And then we can have that up there for folks to jot it down as you're talking and telling a little bit about. That might be a way to get involved.
Thank you. Yes, it is a good way. You can get a lot of information by contacting the Commission on U.S. Central American Relations. They were the sponsoring umbrella organization that sent the delegation I went down to Salvador with in 1983. They are headed now by Robert White, who's the current, or was the ambassador to El Salvador under the Carter administration and the first part of the Reagan administration. And they are actively involved in seeking information and in finding ways to get information out to the American public, which counters this kind of interventionist attitude of the Reagan administration.
The address on the screen is Committee on U.S. Central American Relations, 1826 18th Street, Northwest, in Washington, D.C., 2000009. And you know that if you ever miss anything on the air, you give us a call in the show, in the office the next day after the show, and we'll give it to you. Hi there, you're on Late Night America?
Yeah, this is Terry from Richmond, Indiana. And although, Mike, I admire your foreign policy work, I got to wonder why you worry with people really starving in Appalachia and farmers going broke here in America.
Well, I think that there's reason to worry about all those things, and we, each of us as individuals, have to respond to the things that touch us. My experience in Central America came, as I described, out of my work with refugees. I think work with refugees in the Third World is an important thing to do, and I think it comes right directly from the heart of the experience of those of us in America who have more opportunity, at least, than many people in the Third World do.
It's kind of a natural spinning off from MASH.
I think so,
I think so. Hi there, you're on Late Night America?
Yes, this is Ron from Ann Arbor. My question is, quickly, Mr. Farrell, what do you, when you went down to that part of the world, did you see any evidence of Cuban or Russian involvement? And if so, what's your opinion of what would happen if we pulled everything out and just maintain a sort of a diplomatic relationship with the countries down there?
Two real good questions.
Well, first of all, there is no evidence of Cuban or Russian involvement in Salvador. Even a recent CIA, man who quit the CIA named McMichael has said that he was the analyst for Central America on this information, and there is simply no evidence that the Russian-Cuban Nicaraguan axis has been responsible for the Salvadoran revolution. The Nicaraguans admit that there are many Cubans in Nicaragua. More doctors, however, than there are military personnel, something that our administration doesn't tell us. They get the help where they can get it, and since we're not giving it to them, they'll go wherever they have to, and I think anyone in a like situation would. I think that the best thing we could do is not arbitrarily just walk away. I think that what we could do is use our leverage, and we have a lot of it down there, to support the Contadora process, the negotiation process that's available to the Central American nations. And we're not doing that. We're short-circuiting it, although we pay lip service to supporting it. I think that negotiations, a ceasefire immediately in El Salvador and negotiations between the opposing forces and some sort of really truly representative multi-party state is the sane answer in El Salvador. I think that if we allow if we cease to fund the Contras, the CIA support of the Contras against Nicaragua can solve its own problems. And if we try to do these things through the diplomatic channels that it seems to me we're supposed to be doing them through, we'll have a lot more success and a lot more credibility in the world.
I think it's amazing, and it's not my job to get up here and take a real heavy-duty side one way or the other, but I do, and they all know that I do. But it is amazing when you think that we'll have a debate in Congress as to whether we should vote money to support a group to overthrow a government.
Absolutely.
Now that just doesn't sound American.
It certainly doesn't.
You know, that was being done.
Yes,
I think that was absolutely being done out loud and being debated.
Right.
Whether we should support a group to overthrow a government.
A group of...
They got in there.
Mm-hmm. A group of ex-Somoza National Guardsmen, in large part, who were murderers.
That really blows my mind. Yeah. That one little thing there. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was going to say, this from a country that says it believes in self-determination.
That's a point you make, yes. Hi there, you're on Late Night America.
Hello, my name's Bill. I'm from Madison, Wisconsin.
Go ahead, Bill.
And I'd like to ask Mr. Farrell if he's spoken to any of the American military personnel. How does the American foot soldier feel about his role in Salvador and Nicaragua? And secondly, how would he, could he relate any of reactions he has encountered from American media or foreign media?
The American media people I've spoken to are fairly straightforward in their reporting of the situation down there, and most of it counters the thrust of the administration's line in terms of the administration would underestimate numbers of people being killed, non-combatants being killed. The American media reports it the way it is. The American media, as a matter of fact, is responsible for news coming out all the time about things like bombing of civilian targets and slaughters of innocent civilians in the occupied zones, which is unconscionable in my estimation. The American military people I've spoken to down there are generally speaking in command and control situations, and they're very much, of course, in favor of the policy. It's the only game in town, you know, from that point of view. The American military people I speak to in this country say, I don't want to go there and get blown up or blow other people up. For what? To what end?
Under the circumstances of our last 30 minutes worth of conversation with Mike Farrell, it will amaze you and maybe make you a little bit sad for some days gone by to take a look at this clip from a program that he's going to be doing here on PBS on Wednesday evening. It's JFK, a one-man show, and Walter Cronkite does the introduction and the mid-break and the wrap-up. I think it's going to be quite a special show. Take a look, and as you watch, think over the conversation we've just been having. Clark, can we take a look at that?
We stand today on the edge of a new frontier. The frontier of the 1960s. A frontier of unknown opportunities and perils. A frontier of unfulfilled hopes and threats. But the new frontier of which I speak is not a set of promises. It is a set of challenges. The Cuban Missile Crisis was the precursor of many changes. Coming that close to nuclear war, nuclear annihilation, made us all think in new ways. I found myself thinking about the world Caroline and John would live in. What kind of world were we leaving behind for the children? Let the word go forth from this time and place to friend and foe alike that the torch has been passed to a new generation of Americans, born in this century, tempered by war, disciplined by a hard and bitter peace, proud of our ancient heritage, and unwilling to witness or permit the slow undoing of those human rights to which this nation has always been committed, and to which we are committed today at home and around the world.
Well, it's going to be a very exciting show.
Thank you.
You did yourself proud.
Thank you very much. I love doing it.
Yeah, you did. I mean, you studied and you worked.
Oh boy.
And you get the coaching, and it's a very nice. And he talks to us, right?
Yeah, it's really a very intimate Kennedy on Kennedy kind of evening.
Wednesday on PBS, 9 o'clock, and then Mike also have a couple of other projects that are in the works for PBS. So one on child abuse prevention,
That's
sexual
coming up in September.
and then the thing on Al Lowenstein.
Yeah, I did that show on Al Lowenstein, who was, you know, the kind of premier political activist in this country for 25 years up to his death in 1980, and it'll be on toward the end of July. It's not coming out in core time, so it'll watch your local PBS stations, folks. It's called Citizen, the political life of Allard K. Lowenstein. It's very much worth watching.
Listen, it's nice to have you on PBS.
Thank you, Dennis. It's nice to be here.
It's a terrific place to work.
Yeah.
Have a chance to do a lot of special things, including having you here. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to take a little break, friends. When we come back on the other side, we're going to talk about sports and nutrition and eating to win.
On Tuesday, is the government ignoring drug use by airline industry employees? And the story of Project Hope. Wednesday, former U.S. Ambassador to Panama, William Jordan, on U.S.-Panamanian relations. Then on Thursday, does U.S. foreign policy often prevent new democracies from developing? And Hill Street Blues actor Rene Enriquez.
friends, our guest has put together a hot-selling book explaining how to eat to experience peak performance on the playing field and I guess also on the tennis court. Among his followers are Jimmy Connors, John McEnroe, Martina Navratilova. Our guest Robert Haas he is the president of the American College of Sports Nutrition and is the author of Eat to Win, and it is a hot book. Good to have you here.
Pleasure to be here.
How about good nutrition? You say it can really affect performance?
Well, it really can, and I think I've demonstrated it now in some of the world-class athletes like Martina, as well as weekend athletes that I've worked with.
Okay, now, go back and tell a little bit about the story of Martina and how she was off and it wasn't working and the two of you got together.
Well, basically, as you know, Martina is a world-class athlete. No matter what diet she follows, she'd probably be right at the top. But Martina's career, at the point that I met her, was rather erratic. She was losing to players, for example, that she had no business losing to. And she felt there was one element missing from her training program. And I think her own good sense told her that it was probably nutrition, because she had heard of my work with some of the male players on the tennis tour. She had just lost in the U.S. Open in 1982. And so she called me, and I happened to be in New York at the time, and we got together. She was a little skeptical in the beginning, because most athletes are when it comes to nutrition. But after about 2 weeks on the program, she called me and said, would you consider working with me exclusively in women's tennis? And so at that point, I decided that I would.
You are her advisor?
Yes, exclusively in women's tennis. I was approached by some of the other top female players at the time, and so I really had to make a...
Oh, so they won't, she won't let you work with anybody else, huh?
Well, it was her preference that I didn't, because she felt that this conferred a competitive advantage for her.
Wow, what an endorsement, huh? How much do you think a person going on a diet can change their performance? I mean, what percentage do you think for a top athlete? And she's a top athlete.
Well, it's basically two different approaches. For a top athlete like Martina, someone who is already genetically endowed with all these tremendous abilities, you really can only expect a 1 to 5% improvement in performance. Now, when I was in school, 1 to 5% was an F, so it doesn't sound very impressive. But in a world-class athlete, 1% is, for example, the difference between the silver and the gold medal. Or to a tennis player, 5% is the difference between maybe 10, 15 matches a year. So that translates into something very significant. For a weekend athlete, or for someone who is totally non-athletic, you can expect a 500% improvement. It looks much more impressive when I work with a weekend athlete than when I work with a Martina.
Okay, before you tell us the basis of the diet, I just want to run a couple of words by you and see if these all check out. Endurance, we're going to talk about endurance.
I hope so.
Energy.
Yes.
Preventing injury.
Preventing injury, very important in today's active America.
And I thought that this was just a bonus that you threw in there, perk up your sex life.
Well, it is kind of a bonus when you think about it.
I would think so. I mean, it's not going to happen on the tennis court, but anyway, what is the basis of the diet? What would you have someone eat or not eat the day before they ran the marathon or had an important tennis match?
Well, I want them not to eat everything I was told to eat when I went through college and what my coaches told me. And unfortunately, what many coaches and trainers of professional teams these days tell their athletes. I don't want to eat the steak, I don't want to eat the eggs, cheese, all the quote-unquote high-protein foods that for years we've been told are important for energy and endurance. Those are not the kinds of peak performance foods that I recommend. And today, fortunately, our national health organizations are telling us to decrease these foods.
Okay, what do you recommend?
What I do recommend is the kind of diet that the fad diet doctors of the 70s told us not to eat. The high carbohydrate foods, the complex carbohydrate foods such as rice, spaghetti and all types of pasta, legumes, meaning beans, peas, or lentils, corn, vegetables, and to use the meat, the chicken, and the fish more as supplementary foods rather than as the central focus of our meals. So it's still a steak and potatoes type diet, except we reverse the emphasis. Now we're putting the emphasis on the potatoes rather than the steak.
We had a see, all this is, I mean, anybody who watches this show often, I mean, it's all kind of coming to pass here, because there was a gentleman on the show recently, I think it was the McDougall diet, I don't know, does that ring a bell for you?
No, it doesn't ring a bell. But
it's kind of basically rice and potatoes and vegetables and fruits and downplayed meat, chicken, all of those things, and kind of considered them delicacies.
Well,
are you both in the same bag there?
It sounds like it, and the reason is simple. This is the kind of diet, so to speak, that humanity evolved on. Basically, high complex carbohydrates. So anyone worth their salt in this field who has done the research and who has done the kind of clinical work with athletes as I have has to come to the same conclusion. There are fine tuning points where nutritionists will differ, but anyone in this field who has done the research comes to one conclusion and one conclusion only. Americans should decrease the high amounts of protein that they eat, decrease the total fat content of the diet, and increase the starches. Finally, after years and years of my telling coaches and athletes this, we're now seeing our national health organizations making radical revisions in their recommendations for healthy eating that are in line with these same recommendations.
Let me ask the folks at home to jump into our conversation, and I'm sure that we have a lot of weekend athletes out there, and a lot of athletes in general. We're talking with Robert Haas. He is a nutritionist, and he has written the book, Eat to Win, and the foreword in the book is written by Martina Navratilova. He exclusively advises her on her diet. It says for weekend or world-class athletes, and he's labeled the Sports Nutrition Bible, and it is a big, big bestseller. One of the things that I picked up is that the way of eating that you're suggesting to us, in the end, helps us to handle stress. Are you talking about, for athletes, physical stress or mental stress, or both?
It's actually both. What you eat can and does affect your brain chemistry. This is a very...
What you eat can affect your brain.
Chemistry. This is a very hot topic right now in nutrition because obviously if what we eat affects our emotions, how we handle stress, perhaps even our memory, that becomes very important because everyone has to think. There's some very good research going on at MIT now that has shown that you can affect, for example, your ability to fall asleep easily by what you eat just before you go to bed. And it's also been shown that certain foods or certain types of foods can raise your heart rate, can increase your blood pressure, and conversely decrease your heart rate and blood pressure. So what you eat has widespread effects in your central nervous system, in your endocrine system, and in fact throughout your entire system.
Is this all this business of, like, when people went to medical school, and you're not an MD.
No, PhD.
Okay. When people went to medical school, doctors your own age, you know, and older than that, they didn't learn anything about nutrition, did they?
Well, no, I can speak firsthand because not only did I go through pre-med, I also took some of the basic medical courses as well at Florida State University. These are courses that physicians take before they get into clinical practice, such as pharmacology, histology, biochemistry. You really need to have a thorough grounding in those courses before you can even begin to understand nutrition.
We're just starting to learn about nutrition, aren't we, in America? I mean, when I came up, you know, it was all basic 4 food groups and all of that stuff, and...
Well, you're going to be surprised when I tell you this.
What?
You really don't learn that much about nutrition in college. What you do learn, and very importantly, is chemistry, biochemistry, biology, and all the physical sciences. That is the beginning point to understanding nutrition. But to actually get the clinical experience and the trial and error and the enormous research that goes into being able to practically apply nutrition, it takes many years after you go through school to do this. And that's really where I think the medical profession has not really stood up to what it should be doing. First of all, nutrition is not a regular part of the medical curriculum in the United States.
That's right.
And if you know anything about the medical curricula, you know that they can barely squeeze in what they need to squeeze in those 4 years. So we really can't fault physicians per se. We should really fault the medical curricula committees. But beyond that, physicians are in the best position to become nutritionists because they have a thorough grounding in the physical sciences. If they would just somehow incorporate that into medical school, they would be in a much better position.
Hi there, you're on Late Night America?
Yes, my name's Mark, calling from Muncie, Indiana.
Hi, Mark.
I wanted to compliment on your show, Dennis.
Thank you.
My first question, Robert, I wanted to ask you, I am not a so-called athlete. I'm not a weekend athlete. But I do work very hard full-time for a trucking company here in Muncie. And what I want to ask you is your diet good enough for me? Will it help me in any way? Will it help me perform any better? I work hard. I strain.
Yeah, I think it will. If you are one of those truckers that I see when I'm driving around late night between cities, and you have to be alert and stay alert, anything that gives you more energy or more stamina or endurance is going to probably help anyone in your profession. I really wrote Eat to Win for everyone. You don't have to be a weekend or world-class athlete, simply because everyone that I know, at least, needs more energy, more stamina, and in the process wants to become healthier. So that's really the basis of the book.
Hi there, you're on Late Night America.
How you doing? My name's Andy from Pennsylvania.
Hi there.
Yeah, my question is, you know, there's so many popular books out nowadays about vitamin supplements and minerals, and I'd like to know what your opinion is on that, because it seems that most of these authors nowadays are really citing the advantages of vitamins. A lot of vitamin pills, mineral pills, all types of things. I mean, I'd like to know what your opinion is.
Okay.
Well, there is a tremendous amount of research going on right now in a particular area of vitamins and vitamin-like compounds called antioxidants. The ostensible purpose is to see if we can improve the aging process, that is, slow it down. Also to protect against the environmental carcinogens or cancer-causing chemicals that we come in contact with. This research to date is relatively inconclusive simply because we really haven't had that many years of this kind of research going on. There is some suggestive evidence, for example, that you can prevent or reduce the incidence of certain types of cancer due to environmental exposure to cancer-causing chemicals. There is suggestive evidence that we can extend the life expectancy of certain laboratory animals. But I think more time has to go by before we can make any definitive conclusions in human beings, simply because we really need many more years and many more large numbers of people to test this in.
Do you take vitamins?
Well, it depends on where if I'm in an area where there's heavy air pollution, or if I'm exposed to cigarette smoke, for example, in airplanes where you just can't get away from it, I rely on protective antioxidants to help me.
Like?
Well, beta-carotene is an excellent one. That's a form of vitamin A that your body converts into vitamin A when you need it. It's readily available from a lot of plant foods. Hard yellow squash, sweet potatoes, and carrots are very high in beta-carotene. You can also buy it off the drugstore health food shelf in a capsule of beta-carotene as well.
Hi there, you're on Late Night America.
Hi, Deb, calling from D.C. We have Loretta Swit, Mike Farrell's companion, and Cleveland Amory and Dick Gregory and Cesar Chavez in a 266-group coalition boycotting McDonald's until they offer a health burger on the menu as an addition.
Good for you.
And we wanted to ask if Dr. Haas would endorse the coalition. 17 million people are eating there a day, and they're eating animal fat and lard cooked French fries.
Why don't you do this? Why don't you send the doctor a letter care of us, and we'll forward it to him in his office, and he can look it all over, and he can get back to you, okay?
Okay, thanks.
All right. But basically you support what they're doing? You think that the fast food restaurants should have a McDonald's, all of them, should they have some kind of health food there?
Well, you know, actually they already do. Wendy's, for example, which has led the way in, I guess, this health movement, now offers a very good peak performance food, baked potatoes.
Oh, yeah.
I think they were one of the first ones to offer the salad bar. And, you know, the chili is not a bad alternative to a hamburger because you get legumes, you get the beans in there, which is plenty of iron and calcium and protein.
We just did a thing on fast foods the other day. Hi there, you're on Late Night America.
Hi, my name's Candy. I'm calling from Waukegan. And recently I was pregnant and I was put on a high-protein diet, 100 grams of protein a day. And with it, I gained 80 pounds. Prior to that, I ate the way the doctor was talking about. Now, I was wondering if there's a way to go on your diet when you're pregnant or when you're nursing.
Well, it's not really a diet, is it?
No, it's not a diet. It's misleading to call it a diet. Really,
it's a way to eat.
Yeah, it's simply the way that you should eat normally. It's not something that you go on for 2 weeks or 3 weeks or a month. We've had very good success at my clinic with pregnant women who follow this because they don't experience that enormous weight gain. And also, I don't think it's a good idea to consume enormous amounts of protein, such as you just described. I think staying within the guidelines established by the National Academy of Sciences for protein intake is perfectly fine. The trouble is that most Americans far exceed those guidelines. So I'm not really saying eat a very low protein diet. I'm merely advocating that we follow the guidelines established by our National Health Organization.
But isn't your diet low protein, low fat, and high on carbohydrates? Is that basic?
No, it's not low protein. It's low protein relative to the enormous amounts of protein that we eat in this country. But it's not low protein because it complies precisely with the recommendations of the National Academy of Sciences.
Now, somebody who comes to you, and this is a little confusing to me. If I come to you or somebody, you give a blood test and you start and you extract some information from the blood test and then you work with computers to come up with a very personalized diet? Is that the way it works?
Yeah, if you came to me on a one-to-one situation, for example, as Martina did, I would take a blood sample from you, and from that blood sample we can determine 35 or so values of some important things that float around in your blood, such as your cholesterol, your triglycerides, which is just a fancy name for fat, your blood sugar, and that helps us determine the kind of diet that will reduce the known risk factors for degenerative diseases like heart disease. So, for example, if you came in with an average American cholesterol of 220, in about 28 days after following this program, you could reduce your cholesterol by approximately 20–25%. And the recent government study, the definitive study on cholesterol, has already, I think, clearly established...
Okay, now we're not all coming down to Florida. What are we talking about as far as the book is concerned?
Well, what I did was I took the data on all of the people that I have counseled over the years and found that there were basically 3 levels of blood chemistry that everyone falls into, level 1, 2, and 3. And based on your blood chemistry, which you can have taken by your physician or at any one of these walk-in health testing centers, in the book, it tells you which level of the diet to begin based on your blood chemistry.
What did you have for supper tonight?
Let's see. Well, actually, I haven't eaten yet. You've been running me around so much here that I haven't had a chance.
Your publishing house may be running you around, but now that's not good, is it, not to have eaten?
No, but I think Mike Farrell and I are going to go out and get some Mexican food afterwards.
Oh, that would be healthy, right?
Yeah, Mexican. Well, if you eat bean burritos and the corn tostadas and the lettuce, tomato, and the sauce.
Did you have breakfast today? Did you have lunch today?
I had breakfast today. I had oatmeal with bananas and a little Equal, which is a NutraSweet, the new sweetener that's out.
And how about lunch? Did you have any lunch?
Lunch, I had salad, baked potato. Really didn't have much time today because I've been on flights all day long.
Yeah. Okay. Hi there. You're on Late Night America?
Hello, Dennis. My name's Mike. I'm from Akron, Ohio.
Hello, Mike. How are you tonight?
Very good, thanks. Dr. Hawes, I have one question for you. I have hypoglycemia, what they consider acute. And I have been on everything, megavitamins, high-protein diets. I've even tried your diet for about 30 days. And I just have constant fluctuations in my sugar, no matter what I eat. Could you talk to me about that?
Sure, I'd be glad to talk to you about it. Well, first of all, I don't think megavitamins will do anything for your hypoglycemia. What's really been shown, in most cases, unless you have a specific organic problem with your liver, in that case you should go to your physician for an evaluation. Hypoglycemia is just a transient or temporary change in your blood sugar in a very low direction. Generally, it's when your blood sugar drops below 55 mg/%. What has been shown in some very good studies is that if you base your diet around complex carbohydrates, particularly around rice and spaghetti, you should be able to keep your blood sugar from going through those huge swings during the day that bring you into hypoglycemia. But if it persists, even after following a complex carbohydrate diet, then I definitely recommend that you seek medical advice.
You want to say something to the athletes about water?
Definitely.
What do you want to say?
First of all, water is the most important nutrient that you can possibly eat. It is the forgotten nutrient. It's the peak performance nutrient. I've never seen an athlete lose in competition because of a vitamin or mineral deficiency. But I have seen athletes lose in competition because of a water deficiency, because of dehydration. And most people are surprised and then disappointed because they think I'm going to come up with some exotic thing to tell them. Actually, your body is about 60% water. Peak performance during the day, whether you're a sedentary office secretary or whether you are a triathlon champion depends upon how much water you take in, your performance. And most athletes, even at the world-class level, and that includes Jimmy Connors and Martina Navratilova, don't drink enough water. Martina now knows how to thoroughly hydrate herself, and I think everyone, again, whether you're athletic or not, really needs to increase their intake of water. It's so essential to peak performance during the day, and it's really the neglected nutrient.
How much you're talking about people drinking?
Well, this isn't one of those recommendations where you drink 8 glasses of water, you know, and all the steak you can eat.
Right, that's Stillman.
Basically, your body requires somewhere around a liter to a liter and a half of water. That's roughly about a quart to a quart and a half a day. Now, some of the kinds of foods that I recommend in the Eat to Win program are very high in water. A baked potato, for example, is 75% water, which comes as a surprise. Yeah, some vegetables and fruits are over 90% water.
What kind of exercise do you get?
Well, when I get a chance, I run about 8 to 10 miles a day. Before I went on this enormous book tour, I used to play tennis about 3 or 4 hours a day, and
4 hours a day.
Try to cycle when I can.
What a nice way to go through life, playing tennis 3 or 4 hours a day.
Huh. Used to be a nice way to go through life.
Well,
now it's,
listen,
it's a little difficult.
Pay a price for fame and success.
All right.
Eat to Win is the title of Robert Haas's book, The Sports Nutrition Bible, and a whole lot of the things that we've been talking about, and obviously a whole lot more. Thank you for being with us tonight.
It's my pleasure.
We are learning on this show, gang. We just keep learning. Thank you all for your calls. Tuesday, a conservative is up in arms against the failure of the federal government to police drug use on the job. And also, we'll learn a little bit more about that Ship of Mercy, Project Hope. Have some fun tomorrow. Good night from Detroit.
Late Night America is a presentation of WPBS in Detroit, brought to you by public television stations, by the Stroh Brewery Company, family brewers for over 200 years, and by the makers of Soloflex.